I have it the top of the hour. I don't know if you want to wait 1 minute more for some more participants, but before we will start with the real topic, um, this is the IETF REGEXT interim meeting. And just as any other meeting within the IETF, I have to present the note well um, to tell you that everything you say here must adhere to these best current practices. And we have a really note well that tells you how to behave in our working group. And I also have to remind everybody of the IETF Code of Conduct. And having done that, the topic for this meeting will be a discussion on the RDEF extensions, and we have gladly found Andy to do an introduction here and to pose the questions that we need to have answered during this interim meeting. If anybody wants to ask anything or say anything in between, I don't know, Andy, how you want to do this. I think I'll just put up your presentation, and if people want to interrupt, um, yeah, just let them ask to raise their hands, and if they need to wait till the end of the section, or if they can immediately respond. Right? I presume that this is going to be more a discussion meeting instead of a presentation and question meeting. So, if you are ready, Andy, I will give the floor to you and bring up your presentation. Do you want
Okay.
to? Do you want to have the slides control?
I wasn't prepared for that. How do you do the slide control remotely?
So if you, I
Remote
just
slide?
given you the slide control. So if I think you can now, you see a bar at
Oh,
at
yeah.
the bottom, yeah, and you can.
There we go. Okay. All right. It's kind of funny. I've never actually been on this end of this. All right. So,
It's easy. Meetecho is quite good.
no, I mean, the last time you're right. It keeps getting better and better too. And I was kind of the last time I was on this using Mateco was on your end, not mine. So, I'm always used to like the thing up on the stage. So anyway, all right. So this is about the regex RDAP extensions draft, and so we have a small group here. So I think I think interrupt me when you want, but I may say that wait till I get to the end of the slides. So. Um, uh, and I'm hoping since it's really only I guess 5 of us now, we don't really have to go through a lot of background of what this draft does. However, I think it's important to say that what we're trying to do here is clarify how extensions are specified. And a lot of what happened in Standard 95, there are some places where uh, we've been following the conventions, and there's some places where we haven't been following the conventions, and then there are some places that are just completely underspecified in Standard 95. And so the idea around this draft is to put to bed a lot of the issues that we've had, a lot of the discussions we've had over. I said 2 years ago last time I did this presentation, but it's now been 4 years. So so try to put to bed some of those issues, and in the process strengthen a lot of the things in this draft that will help the designated experts and the extension authors themselves. And in the process, what we've also done is we've kind of strengthened some of the IANA considerations and the privacy and security considerations as well. So, and if I start speaking too fast, just let me know. Um, I think it should be said that we're not changing anything in core RDAP. We're not changing any of the data models. We're not changing the RDAP queries themselves. The reason this draft is marked as updates to the core RDAP drafts is because that's where the IANA registries are specified. And so that's why we're having to do this. And that's also where the guidance to how to write RDAP extensions go. but this should not change any current extensions. We've clearly said that in the draft. If we need to strengthen that language, we can. Does not change anything in the core RDAP specifications. This is really about any extension going forward. Because to date, while there are some extensions that have been put out there that do kind of go against some of this advice, we don't believe there are any interoperability issues. What we're trying to do is prevent the stuff from happening in the future. So the big changes from .05 to .06 is we went through and changed a lot of the shoulds to musts. And so that's one of the things that simplifies the draft. Actually, it's the big thing that simplifies the draft. But there is a ramification there in that we no longer allow bare extension identifiers when we do that. That was never part of the standard 95 to begin with. That's something that's been that was kind of allowed as a should. So this is one of those shoulds that's being changed to a must. We are adding into the IANA considerations thing in the registry, the RDAP extension registry, a deprecation field. That's the first time this is showing up. This was an idea that was floated on the mailing list. So we're putting that into this draft. And then the other thing with regard to registrations in both the RDAP JSON values registry and the extensions registry is that we're asking IANA to forward any of these registration requests to the regex mailing list. So that's a change as well. All right. Any questions so far? Scott. Oh, I didn't see Scott in the list. All right, Scott.
Thanks, Andy. So just before we go ahead, could you just define what a bare extension identifier is, just so we all are clear about that?
Yes. So a bare extension identifier is where the identifier itself is used it basically has no suffix. So right now, like I think one of the I'll take an example. So there's CIDR 0, which is and that's an independent extension that was not a IETF extension, but CIDR 0 and then underbar some other thing that goes there like data is what you normally see in the JSON, where there are some extensions that don't do that underbar part. They just use the extension identifier as the full name of the JSON, the JSON elements themselves. And so that's what we're kind of saying we're no longer going to allow. Because once you start getting into that, you actually have to specify. There are conditions where that starts to cause problems, and when you start going down that list, it gets very difficult. Well, I wouldn't say it's very difficult. It can be error prone to try to make sure you don't violate that stuff. So that's why we're trying to get rid of it. So that's what a bare extension identifier is. It's just where you use the identifier itself, in as opposed to using it to prefix to some other identifier. All right. Must versus should. So the big change from 05 is that we've changed a lot of the musts to shoulds. Sorry, the shoulds to musts. And one of the reasons we're doing this is the IASG has a recent statement, I think it was in November of last year, where they talk about how you use the 2119 language. And that when you start doing shoulds that are about interoperability, you need to say why, what are the reasons when you don't do that should, when you don't follow that should. Otherwise, it probably needs to be a must. That's not a blanket rule, but that's something that ISG now pays very much attention to. So just because is really not a good reason for violating a should. So you kind of have to have a good reason for that. Without the qualifications, anytime you have a should and a designated expert is trying to evaluate what's going on there, if you don't say why you should violate a should, then it's really up to the subjective nature of what the designated expert thinks is appropriate or not. And that's really not something we want. We want it to be a lot more clear cut. So that's another reason why we're doing this. We're trying to simplify things. Yeah, so basically, as I said, the 06, because we've changed a lot of these things from should to must. That's it makes the draft simpler, and you will see there are even some sections that completely fell out of the draft because we didn't need them anymore. So there are some remaining shoulds in there. I've like specifically in the redirect section in 3.1 and 4.1. Those may be mistakes. I need to go back and evaluate that. They might be shoulds that may be turned into musts. I will say one of those shoulds actually is repeated twice, once in the section that talks about redirects, and then once in the security considerations section. That probably needs a little more work, I think, as I've been thinking about this, because there are situations where there are exceptions to those, valid exceptions, especially around some security considerations such as OAuth. So I need to go back and look at that and make sure I've got that language right. So I don't think that language is quite right there in both those places. But those may turn into musts, and then say must, if there's a security guarantee or something like, if there's yeah. Anyway, I'll work on the language there. The case there are shoulds for the case insensitive matching of IANA values. And so that's kind of an update to the core specification itself, where the specification never said that these things were case insensitive. It actually didn't talk about the case at all. So it is possible that a client could do case sensitive matching, and they'd be completely compatible with the standard 95. However, we've put those shoulds in there to make it a little more flexible. So in other words, this is kind of like the be liberal in what you send. It should be liberal in what you receive, and conservative in what you send. So this is kind of the be liberal in what you receive notion. So it just makes the clients a little more resilient to servers that have done the wrong thing there. But it is a should, not a must. So it is completely compatible with standard 95. So that's one of the shoulds in there that's there. And then there's another should around the JSON values registry, and that's for JSON values, strings that are in the JSON values registry. They don't actually follow the advice about being ASCII and lowercase and so forth. We've left that in there because, first off, we do have a number of registrations in the registry itself that don't match that. But an important point was brought up that sometimes we're taking those values from other documents. And in this case, the ones that are in there are coming from a policy document, I believe. So we want to have that flexibility to say, okay, let's take that value and let's put it in there as it is. So that's one of those cases where you can violate the should. And I believe that qualification is currently in there. So any questions about that? All right. One of the things that popped up was the usage of HTTP. So there's a section on what should go into an extension, and this probably needs a little more work as well. So it's I think it's section 4.4. It talks about the content you put in an extension, and there are I think it says must not HTTP and must use HTTPS. I don't think this language is quite right. So I don't think an extension should say that you must use HTTP because we don't want things going over an encrypted channel. But the point of this was that if you have, and so I was basically using like the ICANN GTLD profile as an example, when you have a set of servers or a set of things that are adhering to a profile extension, it's a good thing to call out, by the way, we only use HTTPS. And so that's really what that guidance is about. So maybe the change there is to change it from non-normative to say, if you're writing one of these profile extensions or not, and it doesn't just have to be a profile extension, but if you're writing an extension where you're talking about the use of unencrypted or encrypted channels or whatnot, and for good practice, you may want to say use HTTPS, or we only use HTTPS. And the thing here is 7480 mandates the support of HTTPS, but it does not mandate the use. So that's kind of the difference between the RFCs and what we're asking extension authors to put in. There's also a similar thing with IPv6 as well. So if something is, if a set of servers are supposed to be using IPv6 or be available over IPv6, that's also good content to go into the draft. It's into the extension itself. Did anyone here? I'll stop here because we're kind of getting into out of the must versus shoulds. Any other questions, Pavel?
Unmute. Yeah, well, about this point. So the as I understand the intention of changing this one, because it was one of the shoulds before, but I don't understand the intention now to mandate every extension to enforce HTTPS. So if the intention is to enforce HTTPS use everywhere, it would ask for actually an update to 7480 rather than doing it backdoor through, let's say, blocking any extension that is not enforcing it. Yeah, so it's kind of strange because previous definition that we had, I think in version 04, was saying that it should be considered it should be considered where some data privacy concerns are in play or security concerns are in play. I wouldn't have anything against doing it a must under this condition, but now doing it definite for every case, every extension is kind of strange to me.
Yeah, that's why I said maybe we need to make this non-normative, as opposed to normative language. I think we need to work on this language. We probably can't get away with saying, "Oh, you're allowed to use HTTP." That would almost certainly not get past the IETF consensus. That there's very strong push to like everything has to be over an encrypted channel now, unless you have a really good reason why you're not doing it. And I don't think we can provide that reason. It is also one of the like big differences between RDAP and WHOIS, right? So we say that RDAP can do can be encrypted. The channel itself can be encrypted, whereas WHOIS does not. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think we do need to work on this language. The 7480 does mandate the support in both clients and servers for HTTPS. So we do need to say somehow. I think we're fine with saying you can't mandate the use of HTTP. That's probably a must not, and maybe we leave it there, or maybe we say. It's you must not use HTTP, but you might want to consider using HTTPS. But if your extension says you must not use I mean, people can parse that and go, well, what do you mean? There's only really two choices, right? So, but one's about implementation of an extension, and one's about what the server operators do. So it really is kind of like walking a fine line. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. But I mean, on the first slide, you were saying, let's say this document should not change, let's say, any running implementation, but actually it would through the backdoors, and I don't like this approach. So if the intention is we should address use of HTTP in RDAP, we should address it in the right place, not saying that we don't, and we put it in the document anyway. Yeah. So
well, it wouldn't change the base RFCs, right? This is about extensions. So an extension cannot mandate the use of HTTP. And the part about an extension is that it. So if I have to implement an extension, I have to do it over HTTP. That's kind of no go. But if the extension authors, especially people who write profiles, want to say, by the way, we only use HTTPS, that's a good thing to signal to the client. So does that make sense? So I again, we need to work on this language. I don't think it's good enough in the current state it's in.
Yeah, because there are two sentences that is must not define requests and responses exchange over an expected channel, which is okay, because having an extension which will tell you you must use unencrypted would be kind of strange. But the second sentence that they have to mandate HTTPS is likely something that we shouldn't be saying in this draft.
Yeah, I agree. So the current language in that section is really needs to be changed. So,
all right,
Jasdeep.
Okay, you guys can hear me now, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's very clear that RFC 7480, as what I posted, and Andy, what we have been saying, that they must support HTTPS. So to Pavel's point, that's a non-contentious or very clear thing, right? You must support the HTTPS. So the whole question is around HTTP, and we have a choice between must not, because the current standard doesn't say much about it. So I don't know if it's because one compromise could be, to your point about qualification, when things are not must, let's say they're should or something. So one qualification, one way could be very clearly saying the use over unencrypted HTTP channel or connection is not recommended. What that connotes for me is that, again, to your point about it means must not unless you can qualify for an extension, that may be a way to, what's the word, keep in line with the spirit of RFC 7480, but still telling folks, extension writers, authors, that this is not a good thing. So if you really don't have a really justifiable, qualifiable reason, you must not use HTTP. That's why. So part of the discussion Andy we had internally was, is recommended not recommended a good compromise for HTTP? I don't know.
So I mean, I think there's two things, right? There is, if you're going to write an extension and for someone to use that extension, they have to implement HTTP, not HTTPS. That's probably not going to fly. I really doubt we're gonna get that through the IETF. But if on the other hand you have an extension which is more like a profile extension, which says, by the way, all of our RDAP service is over HTTPS, and you should never see it over HTTP, which is what the GTLD profile says. That's a good thing to put into a profile extension. And so that's what the original intent of this text was saying, by the way, there are profile extensions that do this kind of thing, that say none of the servers that advertise this extension do HTTP. Well, they don't do the service over HTTP. They might do a redirect, but that's a good thing to put in there. And so that's what we're trying to get at. So I think the way the wording has to be is like, if an implementation is required to use HTTP, that's a must not. If server operators, if a profile which is used by server operators wants to say, by the way, we operate over HTTPS and only over HTTPS, that's a good thing to put in. So, Pavel?
Yeah. So I'm taking the note on this point, how it is right now. So how it evolved. Yeah. So I think the initial intention of this point in 4.4 was basically to express the or to highlight for extension authors the need to think whether their extension is exchanging content which would require HTTPS. Yes, it was basically only this intention to make people aware. If you are putting some sensitive content over the wire, use HTTPS mandated in your extension. So now we started to change it into direction of mandating things in general sense, and I think it's not a right direction in this draft at all. So I think the original text was much more well suited for this purpose, because it was, you know, the extension author have few choices. They can be silent about HTTP or HTTPS. So when they fall back to the basic draft, a basic RFC and what is in there, and what the protocol supports and what the operator supports, or they can mandate HTTPS. Yeah, likely we may say here, okay, it's now forbidden to mandate HTTP for whatever reason, if we want to, but no further than that. Yeah.
I'm trying to so basically you're saying mandate the use of don't mandate the use of HTTPS, but say you can't use HTTP? Or did
I would say, so the extension authors cannot say in the extension you must use HTTP, and they can say, or they should consider you must use HTTPS if you let's say the nature of your extension is let's say considering or enforcing it.
Okay. Yes. All right. I as I'm teasing through this, I'm thinking that the thing about must not HTTP should probably get moved into the security considerations, and that the section the language in section 4.4 should probably be non-normative, but say, by the way, if this is a profile extension that communicates the characteristics of the service itself. And that it's a good thing to say whether that service is provided only over HTTPS or not. So I think that gets us out of that. Pavel, are you back in line or?
Yes.
Oh.
So I think I got up too quickly out of the queue. I think we are getting somewhere. Bottom line is the use of HTTPS was never in question per RFC 7480. I think the motivation for talking about it was to what extent we allow HTTP, because this spec is about constraining things and giving guidance. So I think just want to remind the group that I don't think so there was ever a doubt about HTTPS, right, per RFC 7480. That as it says, it is RDAP clients and servers must support HTTPS. So it's very clear. The whole point of the genesis of even talking about this was to what extent should extension authors, designers consider HTTP? Because we don't say anything there, right? That's what we need to talk about. To what extent do we want to ban HTTP? And I use the word ban very carefully here.
And your suggestion is we don't, or we do ban it?
I think that's why I say must not is ideal for HTTP. But if somebody has, it's almost in parallel with the query parameters, where if you have, let's say, known target, you allow it the way we are talking. So that's why I don't know how the group feels. And sorry, I won't have a strong opinion here, but I think the first thing is we are talking about HTTP here. And that's why not recommended is probably a good enough compromise, because not recommended, Andy, correct me, means must not unless you really know what you're doing for HTTP. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, not recommended is the same as should not. But and when you do that, you have to qualify it, right? So you're gonna have to say,
Correct.
okay, what are the conditions? Under what conditions are you allowed to do this?
I see your point. And if we cannot concoct those conditions or come up with them and leave it to extension authors, what's the word, imagination or their rational, then the Ds will have to judge, to your point, correct? Do we
Right.
allow it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, one DE may go, well, that's an okay decision, another DE may not. I just don't think that's it puts them in a kind of in an unfair space too. So so I just don't, and I can't see us the working group coming up with a set of qualifications that are going to pass any smell test when this goes to the last call or this goes to IESG. So I think it's fair to say you can't require the implementation of HTTP in order to use an extension. But that is separate from saying, you know, this service is provided over HTTPS, and we're calling that out specifically in the extension itself. So,
Got it. Thanks.
does that work?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I mean, I think we're gonna have to. I think we're gonna have to see the text for us to agree on it. But I hope we're getting in the general direction.
But I think you're right.
Go ahead.
As guidance, it's very hard for us to come up with that qualification. Why, when, under what scenarios HTTP is allowed? You're spot on with that. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
So Anton has in the chat, and then the same question would be for support for IPv4. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we're deprecating IPv4. Try as we might. So
this was just to help the discussion, right? I think we all agree HTTP is, you know, an aging protocol, and that's why we didn't completely disallow it yet. But if you're going into the question of, you know, should we no longer support legacy protocols, then the guidance on whether you should use IPv6 or IPv4 is also, you know, it's a broader question, I think, than that you can state in an extension.
Yes, that is. I think that's correct. It's a much broader thing. When these RFCs were going through the original last calls in the IETF in 2015, the IESG did pressure us to mandate only HTTPS, and that HTTP would be forbidden. And the only reason they let us get away with this back then, over 10 years ago, was that we had operational experience at the time that said there were a lot of load balancers that could not handle HTTPS. So now it's been 10 years since we've done that. So if I don't think that's true anymore. We probably couldn't get away with saying that at this time. So, Pavel?
Yeah. So the point about IPv4, I thought it was a joke, but I think
it's about supporting legacy protocols, right? Can you mandate not supporting legacy protocols?
But I wouldn't agree with the same situation, because HTTP is as such not legacy, but it has a serious security concerns if you use it, and especially in the RDAP context is even more relevant. And from this perspective, it will make a lot of sense. And they confirmed it was already a point of discussion. And there were reasons back then to support it. However, if the 7480 is saying clients and servers must support HTTPS and at the same time allow something else, it's kind of inconsistent anyway. And it should be actually under this condition, there should be no harm if we forbid HTTP. And I think with IPv4 we will have a bit more trouble.
We would have a lot more.
Yeah. But I put myself in the queue for different question, because you were mentioning DEs being involved in this context, and now I got confused, because I understand DEs are reviewing the registration of the extension in the ENR registry and the extension identifiers following the rules, but I didn't expect them to review whether the extension is 100% compliant with the all the base RFCs in, let's say, this broad sense. Is it the expectation from DEs? Do we formulate it somewhere?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, of course, I'm no longer one of the DEs, but I used to be. The DEs definitely do look at extensions as they come through and say, you know, does this work within the guidelines, the guidelines for this IANA registry? I mean, that's the point of a designated expert. Otherwise, the registry would just be first come first serve with no qualifications whatsoever. So yeah, so the DEs do look at the registration templates themselves, or the potential registrations, and go, okay, is there any problem here where this thing does not align with the guidelines for what goes into this registry? It has been I think we have experience where the DEs for the RDAP registries have not things have gotten by them that probably shouldn't have. Again, I'm one of the guilty parties. And so, but I mean, that's and then the other thing is that the DE, I think the current RC 7480 and I believe it's 9083 or 9082. I think the instructions they have in there for what the DEs are supposed to look at is pretty minimal. So and not only that, it's kind of spread out. So that's one of the things this draft is trying to do, is trying to say, okay, by the way, we're trying to put all of this guidance into some place where it's digestible, that the designated experts can look at. And in fact, if we need to, we can go in and update that. Is that what you're after?
Yeah, but there's still even in this draft, there's still a kind of not a long list of things to do. And you were mentioning in this discussion, for example, about mandating HTTP or HTTPS, that it's expected from the East to look at it, but this is not part of the expert review part. Also, you were mentioning that these work would be easier because of all these shoulds and must changes, but if they are not at all in the scope of looking into it, then actually it's not a relevant argument.
So I'm trying to go through here. So I think 613 kind of is one of the places where we have a synopsis of what the DEs are supposed to be looking for. And basically it tries to boil down. Now this may not be the greatest list, and we probably do need to look at updating it, but that's the list of, hey, you know, does this extension do this? Does this extension do that? And so that's one of the places we're looking at. And just the draft itself, or the document itself is a good place for the DEs to go to and say, okay, here's what these things are supposed to be doing. As opposed to the current set, I mean, there's now currently 4 RFCs, actually I think 5 if you consider the security one, that the DEs have to go back and forth through. So the just by putting it all in one RFC is probably going to help the DEs immensely, even if it's not specifically this enumerated list. So now, I mean, we probably need to take another look at that language and make sure we've got everything we want in there. So, but yeah.
No, I was just wanting to clarify what we expect from this DE function. So are they? Do we expect it to just assure that the IANA registry is filled in with the values that are, let's say, reasonable and they don't conflict with each other. There are no let's say duplicates or duplicate meanings in there, or do we expect DEs to be kind of police of all the extensions coming in if they are all 100% compliant with all the specifications that we produced?
I think it's more the latter, but I think maybe that goes a little too far. We're not saying that the DE needs to like go through and try to figure out whether that, look at all the different base RFCs and compare that extension to those base RFCs. But what it is that the DEs do get to go through this document and go, okay, this document talks about this thing which you must not do, but you did, right? Or this thing that you must do, but you didn't do. And so that's one of the things they can do to go through and say, okay, so the registrant needs to go back and clarify their extension.
So basically, then they have to go through all the normative language and check it through.
Yes, that's the. So in the draft itself, we talk about increasing the number of DEs and to at least 3, if not 5. And having them back each other up. So a registration comes in, designated expert goes through it and says, okay, this is good to go, but hands it off to another DE to double check versus before it gets approved. And so that's one of the things we've kind of put into this draft that should happen. And it kind of in many ways does happen that way even today. So, it's been a while. So the current DEs are Jasdeep and Scott. I was one of the DEs, but when Scott and I were doing it, a lot of times it would come to both of us and we would kind of like, verify with each other, hey, is this correct or is this not correct? So this is kind of formalizing that whole process.
All right, because then it definitely has to come into 613 if this is part of expert review to basically compare all the normative requirements for all RDAP RFCs and check if the new to be registered extension fulfills it.
Yeah. And there was something else I was going to say about this. Oh yeah, and so the other thing is that we also have language in there. We ask IANA to forward the registrations to REGEXT so other people can see them too. So it is possible that a registration will come in and someone on the mailing list and comment on it and say, "Hey, I don't think this is right," and that would be helpful for the designated experts. So doesn't mean they have to follow it, but it is helpful. So, all right, any other questions on must versus should? 43 minutes into things on normative languages. All right, let's get to deprecation of extensions. So, Pavel?
Sorry, now I muted myself. Yeah, sorry. I didn't know what's coming on the next slide because I think deprecation is a very different topic. So before we start with that, I want to raise my let's say bigger concern about the process which is going on with this draft. So I appreciate all the work, but I have a feeling that a lot of changes are going through the document without any discussion about them upfront or any working group consensus. So basically, we are discussing about changes that have been done and not about intentions why the changes should have been done and whether they should be done to the document. And this let's say happened between 04 and 05 and now to 06, and this is a bit worrying me because this likely something not in line with 7221 how the working group document should be handled.
Okay, I mean there is a GitHub repository that we do all the work in. It's a public repository. If people want us to start echoing all the GitHub actions to the mailing list, but I don't think that's something people want. And I would say that the from 04 to 05, a bunch like Jasdeep created an issue for every single one. There was a mailing list thread. So we attempted to identify all that stuff, and I think we are following the process, because ultimately we have to get consensus on the mailing list itself.
Yeah, but the consensus should be there before the changes are done to the working group document, not after. And this is what's happening on the 04, 05. I can say I was more or less up to date personally. I was more up to date because most of the issues I was aware of, because we are coming from my review, and I was following the GitHub repository, but some changes happened last minute, as we discussed in Bangkok, and this was without any discussion or transparency, and this revamp, let's say, happened, let's say, without any transparency.
I mean, okay, I disagree, because 04 to 05, we put all those issues on the mailing list. I mean, and we closed something like 30 different issues. It was all done in GitHub. So I mean, admittedly, some of it, there was a lot of stuff to have to dig through there. I think there was over 30 something issues that we closed, and a lot of the issues were people didn't provide any text to change. They just said they made general comments, and it was up to the authors to try to figure out what was going on. But I also want to say that this is not the only draft in this working group that functions like this. A lot of drafts change without a lot of people talking about them. So I just don't think, to be honest, I don't think that's fair criticism of this draft. We've been as open as possible.
Well, you know, let's say, but you have to admit that here you are presenting changes that have been done, like this an arbitrary decision, okay, to change all this requirements to throw out the bear identifiers, and basically I don't think we had a consensus about this point, and I think, let's say, putting a work done, you always put people in the position to ask for change back, rather than having a discussion up front before the change is done.
Well, I mean, from 05 to 06, we did mention on the mailing list. I mean, it was. In fact, I'm the one who made the offer, and I believe other people said, yes, this is a good idea. Let's go ahead and change all these musts to should, or these shoulds to musts, and see what the differences are. Because there was a fairly long conversation about what these changes would be, and we were all just talking kind of in the abstract, and that was the whole point of doing this of the 06, was so that we could have a more concrete idea of what we were talking about. And that discussion did happen on the mailing list. And the discussion about deprecation also happened on the mailing list.
Deprecation, I agree, but there's the different parts. Yeah.
All right, Antoine.
Yeah, just to comment on process, right? So during working group handling of a document, we don't have authors, we have editors, and the editors they always act on feedback that they get from the mailing list. Now this may be public comments, but sometimes the editors, like Andy says, they get comments like, we don't like this piece of text, please try new text, without people producing text themselves. So if you have a good proposal, produce text, and that is the best recommendation that you may get on the mailing list. But if you let editors swim and invent text themselves, then during the handling of a document in the working group, before there is a working group last call, the document is in an edit state, right? So we always have the working group last call to say we agree or don't agree with this text. And before the chairs put a working group document in a working group last call, we will always look for a global consensus first, because the working group last call is intended to be on a stable document and not on a document that's still in an edit state.
Pavel?
Yeah, so as a reaction, because I think there's also an unfair impression that is created here that there were comments about text proposals. So personally, I even did a text proposal to the part about conflicts, because it was unspecified what it means that there is a conflicting identifier. I don't recall which was the point. Wait a second. The collision. It was in 2.2. It was unspecified. I proposed the text. The text was not taken over, but instead there was some let's say changes that basically dropped the whole bear identifier part instead. Yeah. So this is what I mean, that I don't think there was an issue of lacking text proposals. If I ever was aware, at least in the issues that I pointed out, that the text is expected, then that I was happy to provide it. But this communication also has to happen.
Okay, and I don't want to be unfair to you. I wasn't trying to say you're the one who doesn't provide the text, because you actually have. In a lot of places, even you weren't even not on the mailing list, you were doing it in GitHub issues. I was just like, I don't know what's going on here, and then you would provide the text. So I'm not trying to be unfair to you. But that happens. I was kind of speaking generally. That happens a lot. It's not just this draft, but it happens a lot where someone says, "Hey, change this," and then they don't give an actual detailed description of what they want, so text changes, and it may not be exactly what we want. Yeah. So I wasn't trying to be unfair to you, Pavel. You've actually been fairly good about providing feedback on this draft. And I will say that we had, I think, over 30 something issues that we attempted to address between the two, between 04 and 05. And that's just a whole lot of stuff to keep track of. So that's kind of one of the things that it's a little jarring, where you have 30 different issues that get addressed between two versions of a draft. So you have my apologies if it was a bit jarring, and I don't want to be unfair to you and say you were doing something that you weren't doing.
Yeah, but so Jasdeep, I would just let's say last thing I want to address that it was indeed very surprising that after reviewing the draft, providing a lot of feedback, especially to make things more clear around the use of bearer identifiers, all of a sudden they were just decided to be removed, and this was kind of not pleasant twist. Yeah.
Hi. So I think clearly Andy already talked about all this. So I just want to request a bit of a benefit of doubt here. I think there was one mea culpa, and I'm talking to Pavel here. Yeah, one was that bear identifiers must not. But I think authors as editors, as Antoine mentioned, have done two things. One is sort of, because this is a complex subject, one was there was not a lot of discussion at the IETF about all this, and hence interim meeting. Thank you to our chairs. And secondly, as Andy said, to be fair, basically the expectation he set with and the effort he went through to create 06 version was sort of a realization from '05 version that that version is quite complex, in spite of we being qualifying all the Bayer identifiers usage, right? So I don't think so, as Antoine said, that '06 version is etched in stone. It is part of one of the means to the discussion where the working group ends up with. But I think it's a good contribution to show that that how simple things could become if you go down more the must track, as Andy mentioned earlier. But in the end, it's a decision for the group. I absolutely agree with that, Pavel. And yes, Andy's right, because I was in the process of reading those issues myself, and they were close to 40, if not 30. So we were very diligent about that. We very carefully went through the presentation, the feedback. The only, I think, gap was, and I think we'll admit, was that there was a certain, and even Pavel talked to me about this at the last IETF, where there was a certain must not for Bayer identifiers, and that could come as a surprise to anybody. So for that, as Andy said, we apologize in '05 draft, but that's that. Thanks.
All right, before we move on from here, anything else before we get to deprecation? Going once, going twice. All right. So this was an idea that was floated on the mailing list, and so we've gone ahead and put text in '06 to try to address it. And that the essential idea is that we want to be able to put in the RDEP extensions registry a means of saying, hey, we want to deprecate an extension. What's in the '06 draft is kind of the author's stab at how this would work, which is basically putting a deprecation date in there. The intent is to allow extension authors to come back to the IANA and say, IANA, please say this is deprecated. And so that any implementer who comes along and looking at that extension registry will go, oh, this thing was deprecated. So that's the current language that's in there. It's the first time it's shown up in the draft. So if anyone has any comments on that, please give them to us. The idea is that it's very similar to marking an extension as it's similar to the concept of taking an IETF RSC and marking it as historic. Things that, as I was writing out these slides that we don't really talk about is what about extensions that reference other extensions, which is quite possible. What happens if you deprecate one and then you don't deprecate the dependent, that type of thing. And then also, what happens if an extension gets obsoleted by another extension? What do you do there? So those are kind of like, the author is kind of trying to tease this out and try to figure out whether we've got the right thing. Pavel?
Yeah. So I think let's say on the slide you put a lot of reasons why I think it's not a great idea to tackle this problem in this draft, because it's going to be a rabbit hole of another class of problems that we will have to weed out, and the extension draft could become an endless story. And I think if the deprecation is a right problem to solve, and I'm not saying it's not, maybe let's say separate draft could be a better idea, because then it can go its own way, and it doesn't seem to me to have a lot of let's say connection to the rest of this extension draft so far.
Okay, so basically you're saying don't tackle this now.
Yeah, take the text to the separate document and let's discuss it separately. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. No one on the mailing list who supported the idea wants to speak up. Okay.
Oh,
Antoine.
Yeah, just for me as a clarification, right? I haven't kept up with all the issues that were discussed here. I know that in the EPP registry we have a status column. Is that what the intention of this is?
Oh, I hadn't really thought about that. What exactly does that status column say?
Well, most of the extensions, the EPP extensions, are now active, but I think that the intention was that you could deprecate an extension there, so that it was inactive, or Scott has perhaps a better explanation there. What the intended status there was.
Scott?
You nailed it, Antoine. It really is about, first off, keeping track of the fact that these extensions existed, right? We don't ever want to remove anything from the registry, but if something isn't actively in use, it gives you an opportunity to note that it's been deprecated or otherwise no longer active.
So that might be an idea for RDEP extensions too, right? For EPP extensions, we know that we had this long discussion of how should the registry be populated and what are the criteria for an extension to be in there. And I think for RDEP we should do something similar.
Okay, so you're suggesting, now what about Pavel's idea of moving this whole concept out of this draft and just trying to tackle it in another draft?
Well, this is a draft that talks about RDEP extensions, right? So I think, like I said, I haven't read every comment on every detail of the draft. I'm not into the content, but I thought the intention would be that this was sort of like the similar document that we have for EPP extensions, where you basically specify what should an RDEP extension commit to, and how do you register an extension? How do you, and deprecation, I think, is one of the topics here as well.
Okay, I think I do like the idea of following the EPP registry extension, the EPP extension registry. Sorry. And using like active versus inactive. I think that's a much better way of saying it.
Yeah.
So maybe that might be a good way of putting it, because I think when people read, deprecation probably has different meanings to different people. So maybe that's a good way of putting this.
But that means that the registration process of RDEP extensions should also be in this document, right? And I don't know how far it is in there now, because it's more process than it is, what should an extension look like?
Yeah, I mean we're updating the IANA considerations, so
okay.
Yeah, just deep.
I think after what Scott shared, and considering Pavel's point, because we never had a dedicated, and to Antoine's point also, where we never had a dedicated draft or RFC for extensions in RDEP, unlike EPP. So it doesn't matter in the end. I think if you want to emulate EPP, that's great, inactive versus active. But I think the input I want to give is, my sense is, since we are in this context, keep this subject in this draft. It is not that big enough to warrant another draft. We have quite a few other, I would say, better problems to solve. Although this is certainly a reality check and speaks to the maturation of RDEP to some extent, where we're even considering now deprecation, right? So my brief input is, it'll be better to keep it in this draft, deprecation subject, and try emulating EPP if we can. Thanks.
Pavel?
So my comment was basically just from the out of process perspective, that let's say, if we allow let's say such kind of scope creep into this draft, we may never finish it. And this is my biggest concern, because I think there are many aspects of extensions that you may want to put in this draft, and you want, like you may think, okay, versioning is also something about extensions, so we should put versioning in here, and so on and so forth, and this way we will finish never. And this was the only point. It was just to under our premise that we wanted to get this one out of the door, let's say, rather sooner than later.
Okay. I just want to point out, and I know this wasn't the thrust of your comment, but the current extension draft does talk about versioning, and it does specifically reference the versioning draft we do have. So there is a regex versioning draft for RDAP, and so we do reference that as well. So versioning actually is part of the current thing. But I get your point. Your meta point is that we're increasing the scope. So all right. So anything else about deprecations? I think I clicked the slide too fast. All right. So the other thing is the IANA registrations themselves. This is something we added in, was basically, and this is happening a lot in other places in the IETF where they're wanting IANA registrations to go to a mailing list. So I thought, it'd be good just to go ahead and get this in there now. Is to say that basically we're asking the IANA to copy REGEXT on any registration. So it's not part of their process for approval. So they will send, because right now what they do is they send an email to the designated experts. But what we're asking is that they send to the mail. They just send a copy of the registration to the mailing list. And the thing it does there is it encourages some informal feedback to the designated experts, which they may find useful. They don't have to use it, but they may find that useful. But it also gives a heads up to implementers saying, hey, there's this registration over here. So maybe I want to go implement that. That's especially true for like non-IETF extensions. So any questions about that? And I think that's the last slide. So anything else about this draft we want to talk about? Jasdeep.
Hey, so I have just an idea, and this is addressing Antoine, actually, our chair. So there are a couple of things, since we don't get these opportunities to sort of talk face-to-face. And obviously mailing list is there and we should take it, but I have a proposal, because I've seen it in other working groups as their way of working, where there are a couple of discussion points which Andy brought up. One was must not for HTTP, now that load balancers can all handle HTTPS. I didn't know about that background, but it's more convincing given his historical knowledge he shared. So that's one subject. And second one was, address deprecation in this draft or not? And Pavel's point is well taken about the scope creep. I want to propose, if we have time, and Antoine, you can absolutely shoot it down, a couple of polling questions for us to get a feel for the room. Where do they stand?
Well, from my point of view, we still have a little bit less than an hour, right? So the floor is yours basically. This is really a discussion session and not so much a strong session. If you want to have more sessions like this, propose a topic, and we will be happy to organize an interim meeting. But we need somebody to lead the discussion and to sort of like raise the points that need to be discussed. And for this meeting, we focused on discussing this draft. And if you want to add anything to the agenda, feel free if we have time left. Fantastic. Go ahead.
Jasdeep, did you want to say something, or?
So I think then I would propose a couple of polling questions, whoever can do it, on those two, what I talked about. Must not for HTTP, now that load balancers can handle HTTPS, and secondly, should we address deprecation in this draft or not? Thanks.
Okay, I've got the deprecation one loaded, but I want to hear what Pavel has to say first.
So you want to show of hands? So the first one is on must or must not HTTP or HTTPS.
So Anton, I actually put a show of hands up for the deprecation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, good.
I just had typed it in, so. And I maybe have done this wrong. Can I start over with it? Well, okay. So I think I did this wrong because it says there's an or. It doesn't say, and you hey yes or no. It doesn't actually say which one you're doing. Does anyone mind if I make this clearer? I'm very sorry about that. I'm gonna stop this poll and try it again. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh wait. Terminate show of hands. Okay.
Try to create a good question, right? That's difficult.
My apologies, everyone. All right. So let's try this one. So just a yes or no. Should it be in the extensions draft? So. You don't like that?
Yeah. Well, I think the overarching question here is, should extensions registration processes be in this draft, in addition to, what extensions should comply to technically? Is that a better phrase? Because only deprecation, that's only one process, right?
Oh, that's one part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have other things in the draft which talk about the registration of extensions. So I don't, in my opinion, I don't think this is kind of. I don't think we should have a separate draft about processes. I don't understand it because this one already goes into it.
Yeah, it's again when I compare, for example, the EPP extensions RFCs with the RDEP extensions, then I sort of think that in the RDEP documents, the process for registering extensions is very sumeer. So it's very small. It's not very well described. So then the question is, should that be in this extension draft or not?
Well, we have 8 respondents to the poll of whether deprecation of extension should remain in this extensions draft. And so, if we go by that guidance, that means the process has to be in there as well. The overall process. Does that work?
I agree. Okay.
So let me try the next one. Should HTTPS. So should we? I'm trying to figure out what the guidance. Jasdeep, what question did you want to ask specifically? Can you chime in?
Thanks. The question was, should HTTP use be a must not in RDEP extensions now that load balancers can handle HTTPS? At least that's how I comprehended.
Pavel, did you want to clarify that?
Yeah. So because I think the overarching question is whether we want to, let's say, ban HTTP from RDAP at all, completely. Because I think whether it's extension is the right place to do it is a secondary question, but I think the primary question is whether HTTP should still be in RDAP.
All right, that's probably a good meta question. We can dig down further. So let me start that one. Hopefully that works. So. All right, so we have 8 respondents, which is, we have 9 respondents. So, which is actually one more than we had last time. So I think, which basically saying we should ban HTTP from RDAP. So I think that's pretty good feedback. Did we want to refine that any further and say, well, I don't know how we would refine that further. I don't like doing these questions on the fly. I think that those are both pretty good feedback. I don't know if we need to drill down any further than that, unless anyone has anything else. Are we all good? All right, I think that ends this presentation. Antoine?
Yeah, so this closes at least this discussion. I hope everybody has found this interesting, and I also would like to apologize to Paul that when I described the process of how a document is handled in the working group, I wasn't referring to you specifically or your comments. Like I said, I haven't even followed all of the discussion in very, very much detail. But whenever a question like this arises and there is a need for discussions like this, please feel free to ask the chairs for interim meetings like this. I think it's very valuable. So I've put some minutes in or a summary of action items in the Hedgehog note-taking tool. Please go over it and see that I'm not okay. I will post these on the mailing list as well to see if I captured everything correctly. And we still have, let's see, we still have 40 minutes if anybody wants to discuss any other point now that we're here. Paul.
I thought that one point which was not on the slide deck definitely, but it was, let's say, popping here and now in this conversation. So having the time of the working group here, I think it would be useful to let's say discuss this topic of BER identifiers, whether there is a consensus to remove them and to ban them completely, and maybe finishing it with a show of hands if needed, just to have a feeling. Yeah, so because there was some discussion on the mailing list with different opinions, but we haven't had a chance to have an interactive discussion about it.
So I think it's good to put it in a poll, but I just want to point out that so 7480 does not it only allows what we call a BER extension identifier. It doesn't actually call them that as a should, and it's only in the description of it's kind of more in a general description of how you should name these things. And it was really talking about the JSON naming and trying to be compatible with some XML naming. That was the context it is in 7480 when it said you should do this. So in reality, 7480 never really allowed this stuff. If we want to allow it, and there are cases where it's not, where we do know there are extensions out there that do this. It doesn't cause any interoperability issues. If we want to allow it, then we have to. If we want to make that a should, we have to give the reason. We have to say, okay, if you're not going to follow this should, what are the reasons you were giving for not following this should? So that's the complication there.
Well, I get it, and this is what the argument I also brought on mail list, but the formulation in the RFC is actually also giving a justification why it should be done, because it's easier to figure out which extension put some unknown element in the response, because it is referring clearly to this case, but the server would be adding some responses which are not part of the base RFC. And my point was that if identifiers are registered in IANA registry, it's very clear where it's coming from, so this issue doesn't occur. And the conflict potential is also not occurring because it's registered in IANA registry, so no other extension could use the same identifier or use it as a prefix. So from this perspective, I don't see any interoperability issue. On the other side, we are creating a kind of, I would say, strange dilemma when creating extensions, because you are forced to put prefixes even if you are adding just a single object. And when you create a kind of objects in the style foo_foo, just because you have to use this notation, and because people don't want identifiers to be that long or query parameters, but they start to shortcut it, and it's happened to OpenID draft or RFC now, but actually the query parameters are consisting of, let's say, compressed letters just to keep them short and to be in the style of prefix and suffix. So I think we are going into direction to make the protocol actually worse or less readable, just by applying the rules which are meant for a purpose of interoperability, which eliminating the risks which are not existing, and this is my biggest concern.
All right.
We have a queue.
Disagree. I disagree. The if the rules are simpler, they're easier to follow. That's my go-to on that. If the rules are simpler, they're easy to follow. If we want to update, and basically if we're saying this, if we're saying, by the way, that should doesn't exist in RFC 7480, that's a pretty big change. If you're changing it from a should to you should do this to must do this, is probably not going to cause any trouble. Changing it from should do this to may do this, which is what you're saying, is a much bigger change. And I don't know how we can get away with doing that.
I think Jasdeep is in the queue, so I will give him, and I will put myself again in the queue.
Thanks, Pavel. So I think clearly in version 05 we did bear extensions, and as I was having a discussion with Scott, even that for some things, Scott Hollenbeck, for some things, it naturally lends well, like those child path segments, right? Just to take one example. But I think more we did this, as Andy explained, more the rules became complex. And so yeah, now instead of going through 5 documents, now in this document, you'll have to sort of look for those needles in the haystack. And you're right, Pavel, that we ended up having good enough qualifications for bare identifiers, right? And your point about, hey, the protocol should not ban in the future what you can do, that's also well taken. But I think from simplicity angle, simpler implementations, more crisp specifications and guidance, even if in a way we are emulating EPP also here. XML naturally affords you namespaces, JSON doesn't. So I think it's almost an Aristotelian thing where, yeah, it's more beautiful, not to make it more ugly by having prefix underscore, right? But more we think about it from machine performance angle and quality of your implementations, I think prefixing everywhere starts simplifying things. And that's why, thanks to Andy, he went through that effort of actually seeing that, what if we didn't have Bayer identifiers in the new spec 06? It's not like we want it to move forward. It's a group decision. But things clearly look simpler implementation-wise, more crisp musts, and very few shoulds, meaning you don't have the onus of qualifying. So personally, as much as Bayer identifiers make things within double quotes more beautiful and naturally lend for a few things, like URLs, path segments we were talking about, I would caution us to go for not doing Bayer identifiers. Just because we can doesn't mean we have to, okay? So that's, again, the quality of good protocols, that you don't make them too liberal. At least that's my take on it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Paul. Yeah, we can keep the windows open if we want to keep discussing, right?
Right. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that yeah, some rules may be getting simpler, but I'm getting more concerned about let's say future evolution of RDAP in a sense, because RDAP was specified as a let's say with the registry of identifiers as a protocol which is composed of different elements that can be put together for let's say requests and responses. And right now, by let's say there are extensions which are basically uncoordinated, created outside, and I fully support that for such uncoordinated extension creation, there should be rules that they don't conflict with each other. But there are extensions which are basically a further development of the protocol itself. And these extensions should not look like they are say a different or a secondary citizen of the protocol, but they should rather build upon the protocol and extend the protocol so that it altogether creates a consistent thing. And this is what I'm thinking of, that we are blocking the way for us to let's say make the evolution of the core protocol at all, because the only way we can do it is either through extension or through updating the core RFC. And if the only way of adding a non-prefixed topmost object is updating the core RFC, I think it will be a heavy take. And this is why I like the previous version of the extensions draft, where it was saying that if you are going the standard track path, you are allowed to do a bit more things like adding non-prefixed topmost objects. And if you are going, let's say, your own way without this scrutiny of IETF process, then you have to adhere to the rules which are, let's say, avoiding conflicts more. Yeah.
Antoine, can I had a poll ready to go, but I actually want to change it based on what Pavel just said, to say, should the RDAP extensions draft forbid future extensions? How about future independent extensions from using Bayer identifiers? Does that sound like a good question to ask? A poll?
You're asking me, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So repeat it, please.
Okay, I will. I have to scroll back because it doesn't actually let me see the whole question in one go. It says, should the RDAP extensions draft forbid future independent extensions from using Bayer identifiers? And by independent, I'm trying to get at the issue that Pavel just brought up.
So we better ask Paul if that's the correct question he wants answered, right?
This what I was thinking of it, depending if it's the only question you want to ask, because then the second question you should ask whether we should generally forbid it from any extension, including the standard track extensions, or maybe in the opposite order. I don't. Because
Okay, how about we ask, should we ban any extensions? And then we can do independent after that if there's a kind of a mixed thing. Does that sound good? All right, I'm going to put that poll out, and I'm hoping everyone understood. Okay, so we have around 8 respondents, which is about what we've been getting. Does anyone mind if I go ahead and terminate this? And then I think we should ask whether we should ban independent extensions. Does that sound good? All right, let me put that in. I wish there was a way of preloading these things. Nope, that's the wrong question. Dang it. All right, so this is, should we forbid future independent extensions from using bare extension identifiers? All right, so it doesn't look like we have an even split, but just slightly more yes, actually one more yes than for no. So
Yeah, it's more that there's one no opinion now, right? So
yeah,
that makes me wonder, and that's a clarifying question for me. What's the difference between independent extensions and standard extensions, right?
are you asking more from a
From the question perspective, because there seems to be a little bit more support for banning this bare identifiers for independent extensions, and then I need to know what's an independent extension.
Yeah, well, I meant non-IETF, so
Okay.
maybe should we put that? You want me to re-ask the question?
Well, I mean, if I compare it again to EPP, in EPP we have a clear definition that there are standard track extensions and individual submissions for proprietary extensions. Is it sort of like the same for RDEP?
Well, standards track have to be IETF.
Yes, exactly.
So, but you could have informational or experimental that are IETF as well.
Yes.
I mean, it hasn't happened, but it could happen.
Okay, so I think we're lacking a definition of extensions here that exist for EPP but don't exist for RDEP.
So,
because for EPP there was a clear definition that you could have a proprietary extension in the registry, but in order to consolidate to one sort of like standard extension for a certain information field, you should go through the IETF process in order to get a standard track extension. And I think for RDEP we are missing that definition, right? What's the difference between an independent or a standard track extension?
well, no, I mean, I think it's the same thing. We just don't have the history there that we do with EPP. So I'll be quiet and let Jasdeep go.
Hey, so I put no opinion, just divulging my poll. And the reason for that was, um, if we are saying for future, yes or no, the question probably needs to be qualified a bit more, because it's almost like as if we are having double standard, where if we, let's say, we allow it for in the future for IETF sanction extensions, but then some independent extension authors will say, why are you guys excluding us from using Bayer identifiers? So that's why I at least can't form an opinion yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I understand your concern, Jasnip. It's, you know, I think that technically the definition of the extensions should not depend on the status of the extension. But that's just my opinion. So I would have expected the same answer here. That's basically what I'm saying. You either want all the extension to not use barrier identifiers and use versioning, or it should be there for all the extensions or for none at all.
So Antoine, precisely, you hit it on the head, what I was trying to get to. Thanks.
So I would like, if we're going to allow Bayer extensions, as I should, I would like to know what the when someone says, "Oh, I'm not going to obey that should," I'd like someone to be able to define what that qualification is for when they should not be able to, when they can violate the should. I think that's the important part here. Is if we can't come up with a good reason why, then I don't believe we should be allowing it. And ultimately, we have to get this through the rest of the IETF, and we have to be able to explain ourselves. I mean, say, okay, this is a should, but people can violate the should, but we're not going to give you what the qualifications are for violating this. So if we can come up with good language around when it is okay to not do this should, I think we're in a good situation, where we're in a better situation. I don't think we have that language. So, and I don't know if we have to come up with that language today in this call, but I think, in fact, I don't think we can. But if someone can put forward on the mailing list a reason or a set of reasons why you should not do that, or why you would not do that, even though the 7480 currently says should, then I think we're in a much better place. Otherwise, I think it should be a must. You must do the prefixing and not do a Bayer identifier.
So, the other proposal is, let's say, how it was, I think, up to the 04 version is just basically saying that it is allowed, and if you know the question whether there should be a two-class system or not, it's I think the question without a really good answer, because there are always scenarios when Y is better than the other. Let's say, I don't think there is a large downside of even let's say individual extensions to be allowed to use bearer identifiers or let's say certain risk. However, there was a sentiment on the mailing list or concern that in case of uncoordinated extensions, there is some conflict potential, but in my opinion, as long as you are going through INR registrations for your identifiers, this conflict potential is not existing, and there are many examples of the other protocols which are let's say working this way and working pretty good. So JS Contact is having a registry which is working like this. The JWT registry for claims is working like this, and is coming away without prefixing, and it's good.
Okay, any other topics to discuss? I've put this as an action item to be asked on the mailing list in the minutes, so I will post that there. So I will assume that somebody will pick up the action item. But is there anything else we should discuss today? Any open items? Going once? Going twice? If not, then thank you everybody for participating here. Like I said, I will post some minutes, and thank you all. See you on the mailing list, and see you in Madrid possibly. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.